So we continue our FPS series with yet another video, and in this video we're gonna make a player list like in CSGO that will show up in here for the counter-terrorist, and it's gonna show in the opposite side for the terrorist side. So first of all, let's make a sample, which then we can just replicate to create a list. Okay, so now we have a sample list right here, and now what we can do with it is, if we go to where we created it as a sample, what we can do is simply just duplicate it, and we can use it as a object to create other references. So let's do that. So this is our game manager script, and as I said, we need this game object to replicate 5 times for 5 players. So let's create a place for that. And after we create a place for that, we want to have a reference to the folder that we want to instantiate it. So let's create a place for that as well. And now, since we need this folder to be empty, what we're gonna have to do is create a prefab from this object. So let's just drag and drop it, and we can delete it from our scene. And where we have these placeholders, we can just simply drag and drop our list into this place, and then what we can do is drop this empty folder into that place, and now all we have to do is instantiate this player list 5 times. So let's do that. Let's create a function for that, and now, as you might have guessed, we need to create this 5 times. So we're gonna use a for loop, and now since we needed the list to move down 70 units, what we're gonna have to do is change the position of it, and to do that we need a reference variable in here, and every time we instantiate we want this y position to add 70. So obviously it created 5 new game objects, but it didn't place them at where we wanted, and secondly it didn't change the position of the y. The reason for that is because we use this instantiate formula in a wrong order. So what we're gonna do is delete that, and instead of just saying instantiate, what we're gonna do is create a new game object. To do that, obviously you just type in a game object, name it, and then you can say instantiate, and now here you instantiate the object, and then you can instantiate the position. So let's do that. Okay, now we have a list, but the list has y position 0, and for the second game object we have y position at 70. Okay, that is good. And now all that's left to do is to change their position and put them inside of this game object. So to do that is literally just one line: your game object sample.transform.parent, and then you pass in that parent object that we talked earlier, so this one. Okay, now what we have is our players with the position of the y changing to -7, -70, but the position of the x is offset. Okay, let's fix that. Since we have a reference to that game object that we just instantiated, what we can do is basically access all the values that we want. So what we're gonna say is sample.transform.local scale is equal to new vector 3, and now since we move that sample object from there into a different parent object, this reference right here will not take effect. So what we're gonna do is delete it from there, and then select this transform and tell it to move to where we want it. So what we're gonna do is sample.transform.position is equal to new vector 3, and now in here we're gonna pass in this y value. Okay, now the list is spawning, as we can obviously tell in here. But now we have one problem. List starts at obviously the clone 1 and then it adds the values. The sorting is in the opposite direction. So to fix that, what we're going to do is instead of adding 70 in here, we're going to decrease 70. Now we have a perfectly functional list. It obviously doesn't start at the very top. That is because we're telling it to start from the value 0. So what we're going to do is just simply get a reference Y position and then start from there. Now we have a perfectly aligned list of game objects. Now all that's left to do is to change the player names in that list. So again, since we have a reference to that list, what we can do is access their texts. So if we go into our player list, what we're going to have to do is access this one, player list. Then from there, we have to access this text and this image. So to make our life a little bit easier, what we're going to do is create a script for that and then make it easier for us to change this text. So let's do that. So create a C# script and then simply drag and drop your script. And then inside the script, what we need is a reference to this text and this image. Since we're working with UI, we need a UI import. For now, we have these errors, but they seem to be false errors. Since if we compile this script, we can see that it clearly works. And now what we need is, you might have heard about this, we need a encapsulation. So we need a function to set the name and a function to set the image. And for now, we're just gonna set the player name. We're gonna leave this image for future tutorials. So just drag and drop your text inside your name and drag and drop your image inside your image. And now we're done with this, and all we have to do in here is change that name. So sample.transform.gameObject.getComponent. Now we're gonna get that component, that list component. And from that list, what we want is to set the player name. And in here, what I'm going to do is a simple player name list. So I'm going to say player. And for the number, I'm going to use the for loops number. So I'm just going to pass in I. Okay. Now we have a list, players 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we have a working list. So this is about this tutorial. In next tutorials, we can do is change this player name into actual player names, and we can change this image into their current weapon. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next tutorials.